right, just come over here for a second. It sounds great. I just want to ask you about something. Listen, I got 2 words to describe that idea. Insane. An unauthorized wiretap's a felony part. You know what?
And we're doing it 20 times a day.
Ow! Howdy. That is one crazy get-up you got there, fella.
Yeah, thank you.
Are you in the show?
No, actually, I'm English.
Sorry.
All that counts is we're alive and rubbing elbows with the greats.
Wait a minute, they're not so great.
Okay, but there's Al Sharpton! Ah! Tom Arnold!
Yeah, ain't that a kick in the teeth? I mean, my shows weren't great, but I never tied people up and forced them to watch. And I could have, because I'm a big guy and I'm good with knots.
Well, here we are. Congratulations. It's Tom Arnold. The 150th episode of Don't Praise the Machine. It's a podcast. And man, is it exciting. I'm thinking about 150 episodes. Boy, that goes back to... That's a lot of episodes. That's more than I would have imagined the first time I talked to you guys. 3 would have been a lot then. But let me say, my favorite episode, and there, again, so many to choose from, was the one where it was John L., Meryl Streep, and a horse. I don't remember what happened, but I do. Those things pop out. That's the way I remember it. They're all good. What can I say? Yeah, it's just, it's been wonderful listening to it. And, boy, if I recommend it to everybody, literally everybody. You got it here. The name, Don't Praise the Machine. Such a good name. And if only the content lived up to that name. But that doesn't, the most important thing is you got a great freaking name. That's what I love. What am I doing to celebrate? Obviously, everything. It's not like I'm sitting around in my office in my shorts. No, I mean, I'm really, it's not like my kids are in the other room trying to get them to take a bath. I'm celebrating. It's partying. We got a whole thing going. Look at this deal here. This deal here, we got that's big, I'm doing it all. I'm sober. Otherwise, I still might. I haven't had a drink since 1989, but this is a pretty big occasion. Let's see how the night goes. Anyway, congratulations, and 250 more. That seems like a lot. All right, enjoy.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Don't Praise the Machine. I'm one of your hosts. I go by the name Alexander Holland. I'm sat here in Berlin, Germany, and as always, I'm sat digitally across from my number one pod partner. He's got to be the one called...
John Maloney.
John Maloney down there in Melbourne, Australia. And first and foremost, let me give a real big thank you to best friend of the show that we just heard from with his very special 150th episode. Congratulations. He's got to be the one called Tom Arnold. Guys, it's me, Tom Arnold.
That's good. That was a good one.
And John, why don't you give the newer listeners a little bit of a background on why Tom's popped in today to give us a special message.
Sure, I'd love to. Tom is a big part of the lore, L-O-R-E, of the show. People who joined us early in the show's run will know that we got obsessed in some of the early episodes with the film True Lies.
Yeah.
And that was one of Tom Arnold's most well-known roles, I think it's fair to say. He's had obviously a distinguished career, and people will argue about the highlights of that career, but certainly True Lies is a memorable outing. And we also got obsessed with I did, with the capacity to direct celebrities to say things that you wanted them to say using Cameo, Memo, other platforms where you'd pay them, anything from $50 to $1,000 to get them to wish you well or promote your product or whatever. And I thought then that I was making a joke when I talked about the possibility of doing that so many times that you develop a kind of de facto, rapport with that person. But if we've done that with anyone, we've done it with Tom Arnold, because I got him to do it for the 50th episode, for the 100th episode, and then again for the 150th episode. And you can hear in his voice that and in what he says that he knows us or knows of us. And it's quite lovely.
Putting his kids through college, he loves nothing more than to open his Cameo application, go into the back end, and he just sees waiting for him in there an inbox request from John Maloney, and he goes, "Oh God, I think I know this name." and then you say, "Hi, Tom. It's your old friend John Maloney. I'm sure I don't need any introduction. I'm from the podcast. Exactly. Don't Praise the Machine." So that's his third. That's his third time with us.
I think it must be right. And then what happened this time round? I'll pull the curtain back a little bit on it. I sent a request through the standard channels probably a few weeks ago, so I had plenty of time for him to get his shit together and respond, because I know that he lives a chaotic lifestyle. He's a busy man. So I gave him plenty of time. He didn't complete it in the time, so the request gets automatically cancelled. And I had given him a very polite, slightly long-winded set of instructions. Hi, Tom, we love you. You did it for us twice before, blah, blah, blah. We'd love to hear from you again. No response, cancelled. So then I said, this week, I sent a kind of a more urgent request, which you got to pay a little bit more for. And I just was far more dictatorial in my message. I was just like, do 150th, big up. What's your favorite app? Why do you like the show? Who have you recommended the show to? And etc. And he seemed to respond to that, authoritative tone, and got back to me within about probably within half a day. So that was great. So thanks, Tom.
Thanks, Tom. I do still imagine that at some point we'll be on stage in the United States doing a live podcast to a packed auditorium. And Tom will just be calling us up begging to come on stage with us. Yeah. We won't be able to get him to still have to block his number. And we'll all remember the time that John had to pester him.
Yeah, that's right.
To do a cameo, to do a cameo. John, 150 episodes. Your dream come true. You said to me when you were in your absolute depths of despair, you said, I need something else. I need help. What can you do for me? I need something. And I said,
I'm hanging by a thread.
I'm hanging by a thread here. You got to do something for me. And I said, well, I'm pretty good with audio. And a lot of men are learning about themselves and coming together through the art of podcastery. And I said, I've just picked up a book.
Find yourself through that.
I've just picked up a book called Progress Through Podcastery, and it sounds and I've just finished it. I've just finished Progress Through Podcastery, and it sounds like what you could use. And so I started, and you really began to come out of your funk and out of your shell.
I did. Yeah. And look, it hasn't been completely linear. There's been some ups and downs. Sometimes I think that old black dog's going to overtake me, and then I think we've just got to keep going to 150. And now here we are. And I was having a bit of a look at the, where we stand in relation to other podcasts.
Yeah,
now, obviously the range is pretty immense. So there's some that have just put out hundreds, although it's hard to tell how many of them are repeats. Like something like This American Life.
Yeah.
Every episode you listen to is from before I was born now. So it's hard to know how many original eps they've done. But for example, Reply All, which was a very, very successful podcast, which was between 2014 and 2022, only 189 episodes. So over 8 years, they accomplished just slightly more than we did.
They did deep dives.
What is it, 3 years? Yeah.
They did deep dives where we do little shallow splashes.
Yeah, we do. We were in the 25-meter pool, and we're down the shallow end of that pool.
But yeah, there is that statistic, isn't there, about 99% of podcasts don't make it past the first 3 episodes.
Mm.
And
one person who personifies that is your favorite and mine, Ilaria Baldwin, who's had 3 goes at podcasting. And all of them, I think, have probably, you could chalk up as a success in one way or another. But the first one, I think it was the first one, was Mom Brain.
yeah,
And that went for 126 episodes, so that's pretty good. And then the other 2, slightly harder. What's One More went for 17 episodes. That's one that I think she did alongside Alec. And then she did Witches Anonymous, which went for a grand total of 10 episodes. So in total, she's got 153 episodes under her belt from 3 podcasts. So she has beaten us there, but only by 3 eps. And I think we're very soon to eclipse her, notwithstanding the possibility of some. I mean, you might be on a film set and shoot someone, and then we might have to retool. But assuming something like that doesn't happen, we'll be way ahead of her in no time.
I was gonna save this for later in the podcast, but seeing as the start of the show has been very podcast industry, I thought I actually have some statistics in front of me about the most popular styles of podcast. So Pew Research, which is a very reputable research body, has done quite extensive research on podcasts over the last few years, and so they have some they did some surveys in 2022, so this is quite recent statistics that they gathered. And this is America specific, but it could probably be mapped on to most English speaking countries, I would assume. So do you know what the number 1 podcast topic is? Genre. What would be the number 1 genre of podcast, do you think?
Is it sex? Sexual health, sexuality, history?
No, history is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is history.
No, it's not even close.
It's your favorite because you're a big girl. It's your favorite.
True crime.
True crime. There you go. So true crime in the United States, 24% of the top 451 podcasts, which is pretty crazy. Of the top 400, so they basically identified 451 podcasts and said these are the top ranked podcasts in the United States.
Yep.
These are the ones that we're going to analyze, and of them, 24% were true crime.
Just about horrible things human beings do, and people go and listen, have their cup of tea, and go to sleep. Listening to a story about someone getting beheaded.
And they have a glass of Chardonnay, and then they call and they go, "Did you hear the new cereal last night? Oh my God, it was ghastly. It was absolutely ghastly, but I absolutely loved it." Number 2.
Yeah, there's something about hearing about horrible things whilst knowing that they're not happening to you.
That's what they say.
The human brain loves.
Well, they say I'm trying to think how I can say this without. I don't think this gets. I'm trying to think of how I can say this and keep the podcast light and fun. There has been a suggestion that the reason that women like, because for anybody who doesn't know out there, I think I actually have this statistic here as well. Among US podcast listeners, women are almost twice as likely as men to regularly listen to true crime podcasts, 44% versus 23%, which I think intuitively you wouldn't think that, because you would think women are more vulnerable. Why? And also when you think violence, you think men, you think action films. You know, when I think about a gender being more comfortable with violence, I think about men going to see action, blood and gore, where the men always going,
and this serial killer fucking cut his head off. That's what you imagine happening.
Yeah. And it turns out that it's quite the opposite, and there is some psychological research that's been done, or some theories that have been put forward and suggested that it may, because women are more physically vulnerable and are the victims of violence at the hands of men most typically, There is some research that suggests that true crime is an avenue through which women are able to control that that emotion that is in them 24/7 anyway, because they are more vulnerable, and through true crime they're able to kind of explore it in a safer way because it's not real.
Yeah, I wonder if a lot of horror has the same motive, this idea that people get this twin feeling of being titillated and also kind of appalled, but it's, it certainly doesn't mean that you would go, that person has any appetite for anything bad in real life. But
no,
it's that ability to let your brain explore some horrendous possibility in a kind of safe and fictional, or at least safe and abstract space.
With your polar fleece blanket on, a cup of tea, and some biscuits, just listening
sounds good.
Just listening to some horrible story about somebody getting dismembered and put in.
I've been watching old X-Files episodes, and I can relate to that feeling because I just love settling in and watching Scully and Mulder on the trail of some horrible man that collects human toenails.
Number 2 is politics and government, John, in the top 450 at 10%. Then you got entertainment, pop culture, and the arts. So that would be us.
Okay.
I think,
okay.
And at 9.
We're all of them, really.
We are. It's true.
We could probably do a little bit more. Maybe we'll just talk more about. I mean, we did actually in the early episodes. We talked a little bit about the Somerton Man, which is a great Adelaide mystery, and that did pretty well. And I said, "Nah, I'm not going to give you people what you want. You got the Somerton Man. Now back to silly stories about celebrities,
about the 90s. More stories about the 90s. Well, it's funny. Yeah, we've touched on most of these, so I'll go through them quickly. So it goes true crime, yes, Somerton Man, tick, don't praise the machine. Politics and government. Can you think of any politics and government? We certainly touch on elements of that are politics and government adjacent because you can't really ignore them. We've certainly spoken about the Chinese Communist Party and TikTok and things like that quite a bit.
Yeah, we don't like to get into the weeds in a serious way, but we do obviously everything that you hear on the podcast, you can assume has had the tick of approval from the CCP Politburo, or whatever the upper echelons are, because we've got to put this stuff on TikTok, and she isn't going to take kindly to the wrong sort of stuff. So he doesn't mind us talking about silly things, so that's what we do.
he called us directly and said that.
Guys,
he's got a very thick Australian. Guys, I don't mind if you talk about silly things. That's not particularly dangerous to me and my regime. But just keep it light, all right?
Yeah, talk about Will Smith and the slap. Love that episode. Keep that coming.
But I don't want to hear. I know I've let you get away with a couple of little cheeky uses of the word Uyghur, but I don't want to hear them anymore. You got maybe another one or two of them in you, and then we're gonna have trouble. So then we've got entertainment, pop culture, and the arts. I'd say that's pretty much where we slot in.
Yeah,
where we slot in more typically. Number 4. I think this is probably I feel like this is what I bring to the table a little bit more. We've got self-help and relationships. I don't know about relationships. I'd say I'm maybe more you're the one in the relationship, and I'm the one who needs a tremendous amount of self-help and help from others.
I mean,
I plead for help.
We do have Dutchie's.
Alex, you're the one who pleads for help.
Tips.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a rich history. I mean, you've told everyone how to fix a sticky lock, how to save money on your groceries.
I've lectured everybody about how to have conversations properly.
Yeah, that's right. Lots of conversational tips. There's a lot of people out there who are better off, I think, 3 years on.
Well, I would like to think
they were struggling at parties, and they'd kind of leave the party early because they fucked up a conversation. And then they'd go home and spend 20 minutes trying to get into their flat because their lock was sticky.
Now they know to rubber pencil, graphite pencil against your key unstick that lock. And this one actually came up again recently for me, but I do want to say, anybody out there, I hope that there's a few people out there that were maybe, before they started listening to Don't Praise the Machine, maybe they unknowingly were the person at the pub who was high-fiving all of their friends during you'd go out for a nice drink with your friends, and you'd be sitting there and your friends would be adding to the conversation and saying funny things, and then rather than you just being quiet or saying something yourself, you decided to just wait until your friend had told a joke and everybody was laughing, and then even though your friend had their hands resting in their lap, you leant over and put your hand in their face and insisted that because they'd said something funny, they were now required to reach up and touch your hand. And I'd like to think that now people go, oh, that's why I stopped getting invited to the pub.
Yeah, that's right. Or the old derail without re-rail, where they say, I thought you said blah, and you go, well, I didn't, and now you've ruined the momentum of my story.
That's right.
If you're going to say that, can you quickly move past that and get me back on track to continue my anecdote?
That's right. So for anybody who's not familiar with those two bits of lore of the show, I'm not a big fan of, I don't want to be high-fived by anybody who's not very close to me, and I certainly don't want to be high-fived for something that I've said. If I've said something funny and you've not said anything, I don't need your approval with putting a hand up and saying that I need to high-five you. That'll be the end of us.
Yeah.
And secondly, as John said,
I'm much more of a dick in real life, but I usually play good cop in these segments and pretend that I'd be the kind of guy who everyone could just high-five. But the truth is, I get annoyed as well.
And the other one was, if somebody interrupts you, if somebody derails, if you're in a conversation and somebody derails the conversation by interrupting, and the example that I was giving was if somebody mishears you and then wants to focus on what they misheard, even though there's no value in that whatsoever. What did you say? Oh, you said... Oh, you said I put the cat outside. I thought you said you put the hat outside. And I was like, why would he be putting his hat outside?
Yeah.
And, if that's what you're doing, which adds no value to the conversation, then then you better really quickly...
Just remember, you don't have to say anything. It's okay.
You don't have to say anything, but if you do, just generally speaking, if you interrupt somebody, if you derail... You got to re-rail. So you got to go.
You better re-rail.
Sorry about that, Mike. I threw you off track there. You were saying about the pro move is, let's say you're talking to Darren, and Darren was talking about winning a big bet at the track. We talked about greyhounds last week. Darren's won a big bet at the greyhound track. He was talking about that. You interrupted him because it made you think of something that you thought you wanted to add. You've added it, and then you've gone, sorry about that, Darren. You were talking, and that's back to you, Darren. That's fine. That's one level of re-rail, but pro re-rail is because Darren might have kind of forgotten what he was talking about. So it's your job to remember what Darren was talking about and go, sorry about that, Daryl. You're at the greyhound track. You made the bet, and we were waiting to see what happened after that. And then Darren's like, yes, that's exactly where it was.
It was Darren. It's Darren. You just call me Daryl.
And we have...
But at least I re-railed it, Daryl.
I also like to just become that kind of character, as that particularly recognizable Australian character when I do interrupt people. I go from being like this, and then I'll even do the interrupt like this. I'll go, oh, that reminds me, yesterday something very similar happened to me. This must be happening to people all the time now. Sorry about that, Darren. You were talking earlier about you at the greyhound track, and something was happening with the betting. Oh, I can't wait to hear the end of that story, mate. It's a very incongruent person.
Eyes back on Darren, everybody.
Guys, eyes back on Darren. John, we've got history. You've done a bit of history on the cast.
Yeah, I suppose I have. I mean, the Somerton Man is a good example of something that crosses between true crime and history because it's it's an old story. It incorporates a little bit of Adelaide as it was. We've got. I mean, I don't know what other history have I talked about. I suppose we've.
Well, you talked last week about you talked last week about the history of Coober Pedy, the South Australian
the history
opal
of Coober Pedy
town.
We've certainly talked about modern history as a discipline and why we have such a difficult time remembering the 90s in the same way that we do the 70s.
History. We talk about 90s history a lot.
Yeah, we talk about technological history. So, how did we get from... Remember we talked about this, those kind of systems that you used to have on TVs where they teletext. And that was a kind of what some people refer to as the horse-drawn internet.
Mm-hmm.
So we talked about that and how it led to the internet.
We have as well
and
here.
And sometimes I'll just...
Yeah, go on.
I'll sometimes just for the philosophy graduates, I'll just throw in an Easter egg where I'll directly quote from ancient philosophy and see if anyone gets it. But I'm not going to tell you where. That's for you.
We have religion. 2% of all podcasts are about religion. Imagine that.
Really?
That's not in my... I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm not a religious man myself, so I don't have any religion podcasts in my aggregator. But I guess, religions are themselves very popular, so I can imagine that there'd be... I should probably check them out. I'm sure Marky Mark must... He certainly must be a guest on religion podcasts.
We've talked about him and his great cooperation with the Hello app.
Yeah.
And we've talked about our own, the way the hashtag Stay Prayed Up, and we've talked about the way that our own lives and headspaces have been contaminated by Catholic
That's right.
nonsense.
We did that last week. And then we have science and technology. Well, I guess certainly technology we talk a lot about, and then health. And then there's and then 20% are multiple topic podcasts, which I guess that would be more us.
Guess that's us. We're everything. And I guess I'd say our podcast community has a religious dimension to it. I think a lot of people look to us for a sense of faith in the modern world.
Yeah.
And some of the emails that we get verge on. Sometimes I worry if we're going to get if the FDA is going to start bulldozing my house or something because it's all a bit culty. But we appreciate them.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, sorry, keep going.
I've just got 3 more sentences just to chuck in some interesting stats that you might want to jump on and have a say. So we've got 49% of US adults said in 2022 that they'd listen to at least one podcast. I mean, these should get you excited, John, because just think about all the moolah that's out there waiting for us. This is 2022, and things are only looking up. So we got 49% of US adults. 49% of US adults said they had listened to at least one podcast in 2022. Over half, now you're going to love this. You're going to absolutely love this. Over half of all podcasts now have a video content, and John, so does yours.
We did it. We got there.
I'm
so glad to be in the part of that pie that has it.
Look at me. Why don't you tell
the part that's falling behind? And next time somebody says to me, "I haven't heard your podcast, but I don't really listen to podcasts," I'm going to say, "Do you know how behind the times you are?" Because 49% of adults in 2022, so it's probably crossed over in a majority now.
Absolutely.
Are listening to podcasts. Do you really want to be in the sad 48% along with all the 85 plus year olds who've never heard of a podcast?
You could also say, "Oh, you don't listen to podcasts? Have you heard of YouTube? Have you been on YouTube?"
Yeah.
And then you can say, "Well, we're on YouTube." And I'm saying that to everybody else that's out there now. You're listening to us right now. Me and John are coming to you live and direct in video form. Just YouTube. Go to YouTube, put in Don't Praise the Machine, the podcast. We're going to come straight up. I've got a beautiful green and blue background as I delve more into I adjust my studio each and every week here on Don't Praise the Machine to get it, to start getting more and more like a real tubeman. Last couple of stats, John. Want to tell you that 76% of the top-ranked podcasts brought on at least one guest in 2022. forget about that. What a fucking waste of time getting a guest on. If you out there have any ideas for the show, anything that we spoke about, I know a few people have asked that we talk more about dating and relationships, which is always good fodder. And I'm very, I have a lot of opinions to offer on that, but
get us cancelled. They'll all get us cancelled. Those opinions.
They're all very retrograde. All of my dating opinions.
Simon Schumann, your friend and mine, has asked to be on the podcast.
Oh, is that right?
To the extent that I thought he was joking initially, and now I'm not so sure. And I just want to say, if you're in Adelaide, get down to the Olivia Hotel because it's a beautiful pub. It's one of my faves in the whole town, probably one of my faves in the world. But Simon, I love you, but you can't come on the podcast.
Now, John, you've got a huge list of 150 episode special topics that you want to get in. John keeps writing to me in the chat on the screen here on App Squad saying, "Shut up about this now. I told you in the week I had a whole bit that I'd done." And I'm just
can't get a word in edgeways here.
And I'm just smiling at you on camera here and going, and I'm just going, number 4 is with 4% is history's really popular, and then I'm just typing, "Fucking, why don't you fucking shut your mouth, you can," in the chat.
People, the analytics show that people don't give a fuck what you bring to the table. And then
this is actually really fucking good. Yeah, no, and that's why we do all different types of we do a little bit of self-help stuff on the podcast. And then I'm just sending him like angry face in the chat. I'll fucking walk. I've just written, I'll fucking walk.
Yeah. Just dead air. I'd love that. And you don't end the podcast. You just try and cover for the fact that one of us is gone. No, all I was going to say is, because it just reminded me when we started talking about our coverage of modern history and our coverage specifically of the 90s, you might remember that almost exactly 50 episodes ago, episode 102, which we called Lava Will Tear Us Apart Again, we talked about the spate of disaster films that came up in the 1990s, and it kind of reached its peak, its Dante's peak, if you like, with the release of 2 volcano movies in the same year that sort of spurred them into a strange competition to be the best and most plausible account of a volcano explosion in the United States. But I was reminded of that period the other day because during the Super Bowl, there was an ad for a film which is essentially a remake or a reboot, or I think it's actually being called a standalone sequel. It's a
re-disaster.
Re-disaster, exactly. Yeah. It's an aftershock, I think they call it, to the 1990s classic Twister. Now, some people will only know the word Twister from the 1960s Milton Bradley game where you have a mat and you get into weird pretzely shapes. That's not what I'm talking about. Many of you will remember that in the 90s there was a film about storm chasers who chased tornadoes, which came out in 1996. It was a memorable entry in that kind of canon of disaster films that I've made reference to.
Is it Helen Hunt?
And
is that Twister?
It starred Helen Hunt, who was a hero of the 90s, and also the late, great Bill Paxton, who coincidentally is in True Lies, and he might have been the inspiration for us to start talking about True Lies.
Yeah,
so
I think that's right.
It all comes back to Bill. We used to sometimes close out the show by saying, "We thank you, Bill Paxton," and so that was 1996. Now, during the Super Bowl, there's an ad for a film called Twisters, plural, which is a standalone sequel to Twister. And what I particularly enjoyed about this, aside from the fact that such a vacuous film is being recycled is the kind of particularly 2020s themes around the film's development and the reactions to it. So I'll get into what I mean. So, you know, in the 90s, you had this film come out. 96? I mean, the internet was kind of in its infancy, and I'm sure that a lot of people just thought, great, it's a popcorn classic, it's a blockbuster, it's about storm chasers, it's going to have some cool special effects. They might have been lucky enough to see in the preview the bit where the cow gets picked up and spun around in the tornado, which was a real highlight for a lot of people I know.
That iconic scene.
Iconic scene. It was a good early use of some CGI. And so it's kind of simpler times, you know, and people were happy to just be entertained by twaddle about tornadoes. But now what happens? You have this trailer. You know, it's just a trailer. It goes for 2 minutes, not even the film. It's broadcast during the Super Bowl, and it's barely had time to land, and there's a whole spate of articles which are about the response on the internet, of course, and in the kind of general zeitgeist, just arising from the trailer, some of which dealt with the themes that were revealed or implied in the trailer, and some of which dealt with stories around the film's development. So there was a Washington Post article, for example, which described how many viewers took to social media to express their angst, their discomfort about the fact that in one of the scenes from the trailer, the protagonists appear to be kind of huddling beneath an overpass. Now, of course, you know as well as I do that bridges can create a funneling effect during tornadoes, which actually speeds them up, speeds up the wind speeds. So it's quite dangerous and inadvisable to shelter under an overpass during a twister. And Rick Smith, who's a meteorologist in Oklahoma, he's at the National Weather Service. I think he might be on TV there. He says on X, formerly Twitter, and it's recorded in this Washington Post article, he says, there are some strong reactions to the trailer within the weather community. And now I know you love communities, and I bet that you're thrilled to hear that now there's a weather community. And Ted Lamo, who our listeners and viewers in South Dakota, many of them will know, is on the local Kevin TV station. He's the weatherman there. He said angrily, I don't think the trailer should be shown in a major motion picture, I don't think that scene should be shown in a trailer in a major motion picture, let alone in a trailer that's aired during the largest television event in America. So there was a bit of consternation among storm experts that people would get the wrong idea. The next time there's a tornado, they'd say, I remember seeing the trailer from the film Twisters during the Super Bowl.
Twisters,
and
plural.
for about 5 seconds, people huddled under a bridge. So I guess that is the gospel about what you should do during a storm, which I think tells you something about you might think, somewhat infantilized view of human beings and how they're influenced in their conduct. But never mind. The other thing that people were worried about was that the film would encourage more people to flock to what's described in the Washington Post article as a popular sport of storm chasing, which of course has caused issues in the past where, you know, too many storm chasers have converged at the wrong place. You get traffic jams, you get some accidents, and it makes it harder to manage the storm response. And Jennifer Stark, who is a storm chaser and meteorologist student from Texas who's got quite a big following on social media, said, this is going to make chaser convergence a million times worse. Now, what I found puzzling about that is that she's a storm chaser herself, but she obviously feels entitled to gatekeep the sport of storm chasing, and says, well, you know, she hasn't really thought about the fact that it's okay for me to do something which if everyone did it would be a problem. She hasn't read her Immanuel Kant, but she says it'll make it a million times worse. And some people, so you got the concerns about funneling under the bridge, got concerns about storm chasing being encouraged, and you also had these controversies, which I was totally unaware of around the film's development. So turns out that Helen Hunt herself, star of the original film, had co-written and proposed a screenplay for the reboot with a guy named David Diggs. And she was interested in both being in and obviously co-writing and also directing the sequel. And so she said in an interview a while back, she said, I tried to get it made with David and another guy called Rafael Casal and her writing it. And she emphasized that it was all black and brown. This is a quote, all black and brown storm chasers, and they wouldn't do it. I was going to direct it. We could barely get a meeting. And this is in June of 2020 when it was all about diversity. It would have been so cool.
Doing a diverse twister. She proposed a diverse twisters.
And I found it a bit on the nose that she said, and this is in June of 2020 when it was all about diversity. I mean, if you believe in diversity, it's not just like a fad that occurred in the middle of 2020. Anyway, then she says there was a HBCU, which is a historically black college and university. It was at a HBCU where we wanted to take place, and there's a rocket science club there, and they shoot rockets into the tornado in her script, and it would have been so cool. And David Diggs, who was the co-writer, said the studio had rejected it for, quote, potentially shady reasons. He went on, but shady in a way that we know the industry is shady. And I guess what he was referring to there, although he was careful to be indirect, is the tendril-like influence of the deeply conservative storm-chasing lobby in Hollywood, which doesn't like contemporary reframing of storms, particularly wind-based storms and the chasing of those storms. So that's an unfortunate dead end for Helen Hunt. And she's not, I don't think, in Twisters, but who knows? We haven't seen the whole thing yet. And one of the other bits of commentary that I picked up on, people pointed out that Mark L. Smith, who's one of the writers behind Twisters, told the publication Collider that the Twisters sequel was prompted by his concerns around climate change. He said, I talked to so many storm experts, tornado experts, storm chasers, and went on the road with some of them. And he says, because of climate change, what used to be Tornado Alley, going through a certain stretch, now extends further east. It's moving across. The dates are wider. The numbers are higher. The storms themselves are more violent. So we use elements of that to shine a light on it, the causes and effects of climate change. Well, Al, I'd like to say congratulations to Mark L. Smith for his work in highlighting the broadly overlooked issue of climate change. And I want to say that I feel very grateful that we live in a time where it's not enough for people to just enjoy the inane spectacle of a cow being spun around in a windstorm, in a film about twirly storms and the people that chase them. We recognize that a 2-minute trailer is a great way to admonish and educate each other and have a proxy war about our cultural differences. And above all, to elevate and support the weather community.
Oh, that was great, John. I love that. I love that Twisters created such a wide variety of controversies. I could have never have guessed that the weather community, the storm chasers, Helen Hunt, everybody's upset at this movie.
Exactly.
And nobody's upset about it for the right reason, which is that it's a reboot, which is the first thing that everybody should just say, this is the worst thing about this film. But
that's right.
The weather community sounds like a community that I could really be a part of.
I think that'd be quite sweet. Just, go out to the balloon launching ceremonies and talk to them about barometric pressure and I don't know, cirrus clouds. Seems nice. And how the community keeps getting angry when predictions are wrong, but that's just because they don't understand the science of probability. I'm sure they've got lots of grievances and enthusiasms, and I'm glad to be an ally of the weather community here on the show.
You yourself would not identify as being a member of that community
No,
because
couldn't.
because that would be improper for you to say for you to claim membership of that community. But
No, but I'm an ally. I'm a supporter, and I mean, my interest in meteorology is casual at best, and so it would be an affront to the personal investment that they've made in that community for me to come along and center myself. But instead, I just try to elevate them and their movies about windy storms.
John, I was going to do this at the start of the show. This is the very start of the show bit, so I'm not really sure how it's going to. It's quite silly and light, which I usually front load the show with, but then I did the podcast statistics bit first. But I'm just going to run through this bit and we'll see what everybody thinks. I had one of those moments where something happened to me and I thought, I haven't spoken about this on the podcast. I think about this all the time, but I haven't spoken about it on the podcast. So as you will know, John, I'm not one to brag. Most of the time I have no reason to brag. I'm very bad at maths. I'm very bad at logic. I'm unable to hold any more than 3 concepts in my mind at any one time. I'm a bit of a doofus, but there are a few strange talents that I have that I am quite happy to share with people and let them know that that's something that's a little bit special about me. And one of them came up maybe 2 days ago, maybe even yesterday in the kitchen. Before I tell you about that one, it made me think of another one that I might have mentioned on the podcast before, but I'll mention that one first. And that is that I'm incredibly good at remembering and recognizing faces and voices in a way that's almost spooky. And I thought it was a thing that everybody could do. And then I realized, I think through watching television commercials or whatever, and I would just instantly go, oh, that's this celebrity doing the voiceover on the commercial. Right. And I was just able to get everyone. So the same thing would happen when I would watch animated film. So I'd be watching a feature film, a feature animated film, and I could pick every major celebrity voice that every character that was being voiced by a celebrity. I would just go bang, bang, bang.
Whereas people like me would be like, I think that one's Gilbert Gottfried, but I don't know about all the rest of them.
And it would be Meryl Streep, and you'd go, I think that's Gilbert.
That's right.
I think that's Gilbert Gottfried. But I would even get really oddly obscure. I remember I already had an inkling that this was something that might be quite unique to me, my ear and my eye for this kind of stuff. And I went to see Where the Wild Things Are. Do you remember there was a Where the Wild Things Are film in 2009 that I've completely forgotten about? I saw it once, remember quite enjoying it at the cinema, and then I never saw it again and never thought of it. 2009 that came out.
Wow. There you go.
But I remember watching that, and one of the Wild Things had about like 2 lines, and I just went, that's Lauren Ambrose, the daughter from the HBO television program 6 Feet Under. She's a very nondescript voice, Lauren Ambrose, and she's a kind of back. She's not the main character in 6 Feet Under. Admittedly, 6 Feet Under was on at the time, and Lauren Ambrose was kind of a celebrity at the time, I guess. But I remember just other people looking at me and going, "That's weird. How are you able? How are you able to do that?" Then in London City Airport, about 4 years ago, I was in Starbucks, and it was the airport was like packed, and it's London. I'm from Adelaide, and I was not paying attention to anything, and suddenly I was just scanning the crowd, probably daydreaming, and then something in my brain just said that you know that person, and it just cut through the crowd. This person about 25 meters away from me, and my brain just went, you know that person. And I guess what had happened is my brain had the body language and walking gait and height of this person stored somewhere in my memory. And it took me, I remember, probably 5 seconds. The first message my brain got was, you know this person. So instant familiarity. And then I was like, how do I know this person? And then I reckon 5 seconds later, it went, that's Robert Condina from St. Ignatius that you went to school with that you haven't seen for over 20 years. And he's just in this London airport now. And then this other part of my brain went, no, it's not. You're going to embarrass yourself. What are the odds? Don't go up and talk to him. And eventually I plucked up the courage and I just went up to him and I said, "Excuse me, mate, are you Robert Condina?" And he just turned to me and just went, he recognized me instantly. He just went, "Oh, it's so good. You look exactly the same," which is exactly what you want to hear when you haven't seen somebody for 20 years. And I, in fact,
Not
once...
what I get.
You look like a bag of rocks. Oh,
you look like you ate. People say you look like you ate John.
So anyway, that's my talents. Very good at picking faces. Remember people from years ago. Remember very obscure people. Remember once seeing a play in London about 12 years ago, and then about 5 years later, there was an usher at a different theatre in London, and I was like, you were in that play 5 years ago on," and he was like, "How the fuck do you know?" He was like, "Yeah, how the fuck do you know that?" I actually once did an FBI facial recognition test online, and at the end of the test, it said, "Are you interested in working for the FBI?" That's what the computer program said at me. This week, I was in my kitchen. I have another talent which is completely unrelated, but I'm just saying that's one of my secret talents. But I do love this talent. So I was drying
Dutchie's talent show. This segment's called.
It's called Dutchie's talent
time.
Dutchie's young talent time. And I was in my kitchen and I was drying a mug, a ceramic mug, and it actually can be quite slippery. This mug slips out of my hand. Okay. So suddenly the mug is falling to the floor and my kitchen is tiled. So it's about to be ceramic on ceramic. Smash is imminent. Quick as a flash, I shot out my foot and let the mug strike my soft foot and ankle and take maybe 70% of the impact of the mug. Suddenly the mug gently bounces to the floor. And I cannot tell you the amount of times that I have dropped...
the talent dropping mugs?
Guys, I drop a mug like nobody you've ever seen before. I have dropped fragile things so many times by accident and prevented them from breaking by shooting out my foot and making contact with the object in fractions of a second. Such fractions of a second that you and the rest of our feeble-minded audience cannot comprehend the speed at which I'm shooting out my foot in reaction to me dropping things.
Which also, I don't know, I can see how that would also be useful in the FBI. You've got sort of a couple of spy tendencies, but they're just too different from each other to make a clear sort of Jason Bourne-esque persona. But in situations where you have to say, like a nuclear warhead comes loose and starts rolling down a hill, you just stop it with your foot, and then you say, "That's that terrorist from, we interrogated that guy 25 years ago in Cuba, and there he is. That's him."
If anybody else does this, if anybody else shoots out their foot to break the fall of fragile objects that they've dropped, please let me know, because I've never heard of this before. I've never heard anyone talking about this before, and I don't know why, because it's such an interesting thing to talk about on a podcast, is to say I'm really great at shooting my foot out to break the fall of fragile objects and guide them, because you can imagine I think
that's a good title for the episode, actually.
I think even sometimes, much like a football player like Messi or Ronaldo, to take the power off the ball when somebody does a massive cross across the field in soccer. I forget what it's called, but I think it's called making the ball dead or something, where instead of you letting it hit, for anyone who's not watching the YouTube video, watch the YouTube video right now for me to express this visually. Yeah. The ball, if you don't move your foot, when somebody passes the ball hits your foot really hard and then bounces away. So what gifted players do is they take their foot back. They absorb and I think I even do that. So I think I even do this.
With mugs.
I think I do this. It's falling, and then I really quickly go down like that.
For our listeners, Al's just doing it's hard to describe, actually, putting his...
It's both difficult and embarrassing to describe what I was doing.
I saw a lovely, must have been a YouTube clip where, mid-game, it's some sort of international European game, or maybe it's not, maybe it's like a national league, but it's a pretty high profile, it's a big crowd, and one of the coaches who's, an old kind of ex-player, there's a ball that sort of goes out of bounds and he just instinctively does a really excellent dead ball of quite a high, strong kick. And then the audience just is giving him a standing ovation. You can see he's sort of looking very serious and coachy, but then he kind of lightens up a bit and waves at the crowd. And you just think, oh, he's kind of had a glimmer of, being a younger man and being a crowd-pleasing football champion. And he's got to go back to being the old coach, but he still had those.
He still had it in him.
Still had those skills drilled in.
So if anybody has done this, please write in and let us know. Please write in, email hello@dptm.org, or you can also shoot us a message on Instagram if you've got that open. Because as I say, I've never spoken about this publicly before, this talent. My ability to stop fragile objects from breaking when I drop them because I absorb the impact with my foot. And also, if anybody has any tips on how my two skills can be monetized, because it's a story of my life that my talents don't make me any income. And
I was just going to say to our followers, if you're somebody who breaks a lot of mugs, you might think that a $250 course about how to stop mugs
PDF
with your foot is a bit steep, but it only takes like 5 or 6 expensive mugs for that course to pay for itself. So
yeah, particularly one vase. If you save one vase, you've paid that. Then my course has paid for itself. Then Al's soft-footed takedown PDF has paid for itself. And I just thought, John, that would just be the end of the show, that bit.
That'd be great, yeah. You mean the whole podcast? Just
the whole podcast. And not really even do a proper goodbye to the audience, but just people would say, I used to really enjoy this podcast. And then they did 150 episodes. And one of the hosts, I think he'd had a lot of stress on him. He told a weird story about how he saved a 50-cent IKEA mug from smashing on his kitchen floor by hitting it with his foot.
Then he told everyone to sign up for his course, but he never actually put out any details. He just disappeared.
John, do you want to say anything to anybody out? I mean, there'll be DPTM completists out there. I certainly know my mother is one of them. Shout out Marie, and probably Dad as well. Shout out Marie and Stephen. I think they're DPTM completists who have listened to every single episode.
That is amazing. And I do want to sincerely thank you, of course, and those people. And in the early episodes of the show, I remember thinking, because people would say to me, I drove from Melbourne to Ballarat and I listened to your podcast the whole way. That's a few hours for those who it's probably a couple of hours for those who don't know. And then as the podcast grew, I thought, and I remember mentioning this, could you do a long haul flight and listen to the podcast, just pop it on as the plane's taking off, and then, as you're landing in London or New York, you take it, you go, well, yeah, I'm just about at the end of the podcast. But we must now be at the point where if you say, well, an average podcast, because some of the early ones were shorter, but the average might be now about 40 minutes. What do you reckon?
Yeah, they're getting closer to an hour now.
Yeah, but if you say all the ones balance that out a bit. So we'll say 40 minutes times 150, that's 6,000 minutes. And so it's, Malcolm Gladwell says 10,000 hours, but I think he's just pulled that out of his ass, to be honest. I'm not sure there's any science behind that. But what's that divided? That's 100 hours, right? So you could now do what? I don't know. You could do 5 flights, but to and from 5 really long haul flights, and the whole way. You could just be listening to the podcast. You wouldn't repeat it at all. Now that's got to take care of some people's travel for the next decade. And I'm jealous because I don't have anything like that to distract me for 100 hours. But no, thank you very much to all of you who've listened for that long, who've been part of the DPTM community, particularly if you've invited others into that community. And if you've come along more recently, we're very excited to have you along for the ride as well. I hope you've been enjoying the new ventures into Reels and into the newsletter, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And we're just getting started.
Guys, we're just getting started.
150, put a 0 on that because that's where we're going.
Yeah, absolutely. Watch out Joe Rogan and watch out Jason Bateman and Will Arnett and the other one who just got $100 million for 3 years for their podcast, Smartless. Because I'm telling you right now, we're coming for that moon money. We're coming for it.
Anyone can just sit around brown-nosing celebrities with their mates. We're doing something different here.
Exactly. We actually have to come up with shit every single week instead of just going, oh, you look lovely. Oh, I remember we did that movie together, and then we went to that restaurant afterwards. Oh my God. Like, we got to actually think. We can't just rely on Natalie Portman popping up on a really poorly mic'd Zoom call because a fucking PR person told her she had to do it, and then they all do false modesty for an hour. We don't have false modesty. No. We have no modesty.
We've gone from what I thought was quite a gracious comment or series of comments by me into being a little bit more critical and puerile. But that's the kind of gamut that we run on the show.
It's and dynamic.
We thank you for being on that roller coaster with us.
Thanks heaps, everybody. That's episode number 150. And I really want to say actually, I don't want to say thank you to Squadcast because I just paid for it. But 150 episodes, we're celebrating with an annual Squadcast membership. We've paid $140. So we you get a special discount if you pay for the whole year instead of month by month. It lets us record. So, I'm just putting it out there that Squadcast is what we're recording on. So if there's any problems, then everybody's going to know it's Squadcast's fault. But I'm also looking forward to this brand new chapter with Squadcasts. And as I just said,
as our team, part of the DPTM team.
BTM.
Colin's Colin, our producer, starting to look around and wonder what his job is anymore. I think he's getting a bit of relevance deprivation syndrome. He's going, I don't like this. He's going, guys, I don't trust the Zencaster team. So, okay, we said, all right, fine. We believe you. You've got our best interests at heart. We'll move to Squadcast. Now he's saying to me, I don't know about these guys. I'm saying, Colin, the common denominator here is you, mate. Now, if you want to give me reasons to take you off the payroll, keep talking.
We do want to say thank you to Colin, our producer, as well.
Thanks, Col.
He has taken some of the load off us after we got him in way back in episode. God knows, it's going to be like pre-episode 50. Did we get?
Yeah, it must be.
Did we get producer Cole in? Thank you so much, everybody. That's been episode number 150 of Don't Praise the Machine. We can't wait to see you for the next 150. My name is Alexander Holland, as it is every single week here in Berlin, Germany. It's sat across from me. It's your number one man with B-Phil from Oxford. And what are your other 2 degrees, John?
Told you. Graduate diploma of Reiki.
Graduate
of Reiki.
With John's bachelor of Reiki and his graduate diploma in Reiki. Thank you so much, everybody. This has been Don't Praise the Machine. I've been Alexander Holland, and we can't wait. And my other host down there, your name is
John Maloney.
Thank you so much, everybody, and we can't wait to see you next week.
The fucking podcast.